And hit play because I'll mess with you for a minute just to make it sound human. And I always say something and they are like beep.
Slightly insulted. You think I didn't already hit play?
Oh. Hey everybody, welcome into the Ben Burnett Show. My name is Ben Burnett. I want to give a special shout out to Strongside Solutions, who's jumped on with us as a sponsor. My guest today is Steve DeSutter, the president and CEO of Focus Brands. Welcome in, Steve.
Thanks, Ben. Good to be here.
So I wanted to have you in today to talk about, we talk about all the time about how many interesting people there are in this community, and you're one of them. And Steve is the president, like I said, is the president and CEO of Focus Brands. Steve, what all is under the Focus Brands umbrella, and how on earth did you get into the food business?
Yeah. So let me start with the family tree, right? So you got to start there, and I'll get to the second part. So the family tree is made up of 7 brands, most well known nationally. We are operating in all 50 U.S. states and in 50 countries, with 6,200 plus shops, bakeries, and restaurants. And the brands are really well known in Georgia. Moe's, which was born here.
Welcome to Moe's.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could get a job doing that.
Let's not give me too much credit.
So Moe's, McAllister's, Schlotzsky's, brands that have been around for a long time, still incredibly popular. And then Annie Ann's Pretzels. You won't go to a mall without finding them. Cinnabon cinnamon rolls, which is amazingly still one of the best same-store sales comping brands, in the world, considering that it's got a lot of sugar and gluten in it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily popular with skinny people.
Exactly. Carvel ice cream, and the newest brand, the 7th one in our family, which is Jamba Juice, which is not hugely well known here in Georgia. There are a few.
It's West Coast.
West Coast, yep, born and bred.
Through and through. That was when I saw that. When did you guys acquire Jamba Juice?
Last fall.
So I was going to say, when I saw that, I was like, man, does that give me distribution into my local Kroger? And the answer to that is yes. And I can tell you, my kids eat those smoothies, not every day, but it's weekly. We love Jamba Juice. So tell me this, you moved to Atlanta to go to work for Focus Brands.
I did.
Walk through your career, because I think it's really interesting. You're not the guy who just went to Harvard and became a CEO. Like, you really earned it. And there are some interesting stories along the way as to how you got into this line of work. And I think it's really encouraging to a lot of people for several reasons. There are plenty of people who think they get pot committed to a career at 35, and that's just the way they have to go. And you prove it. Not only do you prove it wrong, you prove it wrong by a pretty wide margin.
Well, thanks, Ben. So yeah, it's a very eclectic story. It was the one that I often told my children, I'm not sure you actually want to follow this path, but it really worked out well for me. And there are pieces of it I'd recommend to a lot of people. First of all, my degree is in commerce from a small school in Western New York called Nag University. I didn't actually get the 4-year degree until I'd been in business for 20 years. I had left college with a 2-year degree. It wasn't sufficient in, of all things, economics, agricultural economics. You'll soon find a pattern here, which there is no pattern in my life. That's the one you'll find. And if you ever ask me what it is I think makes great executives, it's just exactly that. People who are willing to break patterns, because when you break a pattern, you get to see things in a completely different way. And I've gotten to do that in my career. So, reasonable education. I got it, fairly late in life while I and my wife raising six kids along the way. That was part of why going to school at night and finishing college took time. I worked in agricultural businesses. I worked in industrial products businesses. In the last 15 years, I moved over into food service businesses, and a lot of stops along the way. And every one of those gave me a perspective of business or of how to look at opportunity. And how to look at what success could look like. stretching boundaries, and all of those added up into today. I get a chance to run a business that's $3.5 billion in system sales. We have 2,000 plus independent owners or franchisees at Focus Brands, and to be able to relate to them means I have to be able to get down to the one unit owner and what it means to be a everyday operator, and to the big multi-unit owner, that what it means to run a big multi-million-dollar business. And I can equate to all of them and relate to them and be able to give them advice and my thoughts and counsels on what they need to do to run their businesses.
That is, it's pretty interesting. So when you decided that you wanted to go into the food service slash fast food, which by the way, Steve is a skinny guy. So I don't think he necessarily goes into it, but I know one of the when you really got to an executive leadership position, it was with a company that everybody knows, where you've got the Burger King, and you've lived internationally.
Yes.
Was that just a risk you were willing to take when you, as you were really evaluating how you wanted to grow your career, what you saw for your family? Where does that play in? How does somebody get to a place where they're like, I'm willing to do a lot of business in Asia, I'm willing to do a lot of business in Europe, and I'm willing to potentially relocate there?
Yeah.
Talk for just a couple minutes about with the decisions you make as you grew this mid-career and those sort of conversations that you have, because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're being kind when you say mid-career, because I know you're looking across the table, the gray-haired guy. Yeah, it I would say fun. Necessity, of course, is the mother of invention. And it is so true. With the size of the family I had, I suppose that made taking risk part of the formula. If I wanted to win big, usually risk and reward have a relationship, and they certainly did throughout my career. I think probably characterizing risk is this one move. It was the most interesting of all of the moves along the way that taught me it was okay to take a risk. I had a young family. The fifth child had been born. We were moving from a business in ag, and ag was great. I was very successful there, but it wasn't exactly the kind of careers that put you in the Fortune 500 limelight, right?
Sure.
Okay. And so I was asked to come and move to Cleveland, Ohio, to a research center with 700 PhDs, and my job was to start businesses from scratch. Believe me, I had no experience.
Were you
in doing
lost?
that. Oh, totally. I showed up on the campus, and these guys with all the PhDs were spouting off words I couldn't spell. I said, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do?" And I dug in, and before long, I was the fascination of the campus, because I was the kind of marketing person inside of what was really a research facility. I was able to start a couple of businesses, spin those businesses off. And from that, I learned that the only real risk is not taking risk. And that's how I ran the rest of my career. I moved from position to position. One piece of advice, by the way, if it's worth giving, it's the one I love to give to executives or young and old who are building their careers or their lives. Lots of times we look at the next job and we say, well, I don't want to settle for that job. You have to look way past the next thing you're going to do. You really, as the best you can, a life view really helps. Where do I want to be in 10 years is so much better than where I want to be in 2 years. And so think about your career, whether it's positions inside of a company or moving between companies, as steps along a continuum that move you down a path towards your goals. And if you're willing to engineer your life that way, then sometimes you'll take roles that feel risky, or you may have some uncertainty about how well you'll do.
Or if you really want the short term for the long term.
Exactly. But if you take them, what you learn from the patterns that you break can be incredibly invaluable to you as you move on down through life.
So to piggyback off of that, I met Steve on a Delta flight going to New York City, and I'm the crazy person on the airplane, and most of the time I won't say a word to anybody. And I was wearing shorts, headed up there because I didn't have anything to do until the afternoon. So if no one's going to know who I am, where they might know who you were, I'm dressing cash.
Yeah.
And that was no exception. And so I'm sitting there doing research because my wife and I were wandering through our adoption with my youngest son in China. And I don't know if you saw what I was doing or saw what I was reading, and you were just like, tell me about that. That's a very, and it wasn't like with all this sage wisdom from career. It was like, walk me through this because I don't know. And I'm genuinely interested in what this process is like. Find out later that you've done a ton of business in China and in a different facet, wanted to learn some things about that. But you gave me your card and said, if I can help you with anything, let me know. And I looked down at it. It was the president and CEO of Focus Brands. I was like, that's one of the largest companies in Atlanta. And I thought that was people that you meet, I'd tell anybody to go alongside with that. Don't ever discount the person that's sitting next to you on an airplane.
Right.
Never. Because you don't know who they are. You don't know where the opportunity is. You don't know. And that's not just the airplane. That's a proverbial airplane. Like, you pass talent every day that's just hilarious. If you just open your mouth, get out of your phone and look around. And I thought that was great. And the one advice that you gave me then was, I was working for Verizon at the time, and they were about to sell me off. And I knew where they were going to sell me off was not where I wanted to be. And so I said, hey, man, what would you say as a guy who's kind of seemed to be doing okay, sitting up here? What would you say? And it was like, if you love what you're doing and you don't like the situation you're going to, don't be afraid to go somewhere small and bet on yourself. If you're willing to bet on yourself, a lot of things take care of themselves on their own. Man, I will carry that with me forever.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I mean, that was my life. My first long career, the first 19 years was a small oil company. Most people recognize the name, called British Petroleum. They own different divisions, and I moved around between those divisions. But I knew that the real win in a career was getting to a place where what I did actually moved the needle. Because no matter how good I was at British Petroleum, I wasn't going to change the outcome of the company. But I could get to that small and mid-cap or mid-sized business, and I could get to the place where I could actually influence change, then the chances of reward would also be much higher.
Let's talk about that. We're going to take a quick break. As you know, we're all greedy capitalists, and so I've got to make some money here. Are you a business owner with over 150 employees? Did you just receive an increase in your healthcare premiums again this year? When it comes to the cost of healthcare, there is something that you can do to control costs without sacrificing qualities. StrongSide Solutions developed eBenefits, a program that provides restructuring of the individual parts of the healthcare delivery system to employers with their employees. With over 120 employees, the eBenefits healthcare model saved the city of Villa Rica over $1 million in 2018 alone. Restructure your healthcare, release trapped capital, manage your healthcare spend as you would with any other facet of your business, and call StrongSide Solutions today at 770-4STRONG. That's 770-4STRONG, or visit them online at www.strongsidesolutions.com. Welcome back into the Ben Burnett Show. My guest, as we've been talking, is Steve DeSutter. Say it again.
DeSutter.
DeSutter.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
How many people get that right?
Everyone.
Oh yeah,
everyone. Yeah, because I go with the flow.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a look. I've been saying it my whole life. I find it hard, so it's okay if you do.
So Steve, tell me this. You're going back into your career at British Petroleum. Wander through that and then transitions over the next couple of years that have really brought you to Atlanta and brought you where you are now.
So the time I spent at the big company BP was fabulous, by the way. I mean, there's always a good, if that's in your career somewhere along the line, if people are there, that's great. If you're in a big P&G company or other big employers in our community, great, that's good for you. But understand that those are great places also to learn. But if you really want to stretch your muscle, and you want to go out and take what you've learned and then get and heighten the potential of your rewards, then it's always great to move off at some point into smaller cap kinds of businesses. Look, I made a choice along the way. One of them was that I recognized that, having worked in service businesses and in industrial businesses, that I actually liked the service businesses better. That was good for me. And the reason was that it was a lot easier. This is a hard statement to believe, but it is true, at least in my experience. It was easier to change people's minds and get them aligned against a set of goals than it was to move a factory or a plant from one country to another country and figure out all the economics and get caught in the...
Unpack that.
Yeah. So, brick and mortar. I mean, brick and mortar moves around look at our current environment. The president wants to bring everybody back and manufacture everything in the US. That's a nice idea, but it's hard to do.
Right.
Because factories you just don't jack them up, stick them in your suitcase, check them on Delta and fly them home. They're just hard. They're hard assets, and those hard assets make for harder business decisions. I found that if you could actually create a vision that people could understand, and that you were good at communicating, and that you were a thoughtful leader, remaining curious all the time, helping people understand how to break patterns and how to take risk in organizations alongside you, that you could get a lot done and you could create exceptional results. And so for me as a leader, that I guess it was just the easier way to do it.
After when you decided that oil and natural gas was its past day, although reaching tremendous heights in business, how is coming home and having a conversation with your wife and your family that you're going to totally switch industries and go to the bottom, like how hard was that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to think about it very romantically years later.
Yeah.
Okay. But if I put myself
Sound
actually,
like me when I'm running for office.
yeah, it's like, oh, this is nothing, honey, But the truth is that, yeah, there was some real anxiety moving 6 children from an agricultural community to the big city of Cleveland, and at the time, and then many other places since, actually living, as you mentioned earlier, we lived in London for a while.
Would you do that again?
Oh, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Loved it. Yeah.
Anywhere, have you lived anywhere in Asia?
No, I haven't. I spent a lot of time traveling in Asia. It's not been as an interest to me, but I do really love Europe. I have a daughter who lives in Luxembourg today with her husband.
You
and
may have
2
instilled that in her.
grandkids. So, oh, definitely. It was part of the worldview that we wanted to make sure our children all had, was that the globe was their marketplace, or was the place they would operate in, not just their state or their local town and community. And all that is good, but it's global. It's global, and it was big, and our kids have all been international travelers and excited about that as results. We're grateful for that.
I was watching. I thought of you last night because I was watching. I know you make decisions, and your leadership team, who you entrust immensely, make decisions based on data and feedback in real time. And you guys monitor your social media, like a hawk.
Yeah.
Down to the individual bad experience or good experience, and
Right.
you reward those accordingly. I was watching something on artificial intelligence last night on 60 Minutes, and that the guy said, who was educated here, lived in Silicon Valley, he came forward and said, China is the best place to operate an AI environment in the free market. And my wife was just, how is that possible? It's China. And I think so much of that is yes, are there different rules and regulations? 100%. But at the same time, when you get your WhatsApp or your WeChat app on your phone and you go over there, and I know you spend time in China, in Shenzhen, and there's a large company here that has their Chinese headquarters is there. Talk about how you think that we're going to be able to compete with them from an international perspective, knowing that they're so far ahead of us on what they can do with artificial intelligence, but also how are we going to be able to compete as Americans on a global landscape? I know you're just a fan of the global economy. Talk to me about what you see when you travel, and what's really interesting to you, and where do you look for the next big moves?
Well, I don't know where to look for the next big moves. My crystal ball is getting hazy there. And that's because change is happening so fast. So the China that I was in 14 years ago, when I opened the very first Burger Kings in China, where in the day I befriended in the US, I hired a very powerful consultant. He had been Colin Powell's chief of staff before he retired. So he was pretty well connected in China as my consultant, and I got introduced to the who's who in Beijing and opened up that country and got access to real estate and understood then that the rule of law wasn't what you bartered on in China in the day. In the day, it was really who you knew, and it mattered, and very above board. It was very, very above board. It was always straightforward. Anybody who did it any other way was going to be in trouble over
Sure.
time. That was obvious. So I look at China today versus 14 years ago, and it's stunning. Over 80% of all financial transactions, retail purchases are made digitally on the telephone.
That is so foreign.
Right. So in China, if you ask people, what would you be willing to lose, your wallet or your phone? 75% would say their wallet. In the United States, the same question, 75% would be willing to lose their phone over their wallet. And so why China's ahead on AI is because they have a data set that's so deep and so rich, and they've been so thoughtful because they just built this grand economy that grew for about 10 years at a compound annual rate of 10%. They grew it on the basis of digits and data and information gathering.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And that so we're working on big data here. We're finding ways to share it, but we have these commercial tentacles into big data that cause it to cost money to get access to it. When China, who has access to it, is obviously government. At no cost.
And you don't have a choice whether you're opting in.
No, there is no choice.
One of the things that I think is really interesting when you look at the cities that have sprung up over there, and by and large in Asia,
Yeah.
places that do not suffer from a lack of population. I've read today in the Wall Street Journal that the United States birth rate in 2017 had not been as low since 1987. That's 30 years, and that's not a good statistic for this country and for economic growth. As you look at China, they have cities in the last 20 years that have gone from virtually no one. I remember reading about Shenzhen when it first started, and it sits right across the river
from Hong Kong.
From
Yeah.
Hong Kong.
Right.
It has 20 million people today,
And the average age is a little over 25.
and they're young.
Yes.
And that's like when you look at whether it's downtown Sandy Springs or Alpharetta or Atlanta, you're trying to recruit a workforce to float an economy in 20 years that may change, but you will need people. And America is getting drastically older in a hurry, and they are not.
Right.
And I wonder where I think that shift of power, if it's going to take place, lies with that data set as much as it does in anything.
It does, Ben. It does. So if you want to get a glimpse of it, just look at Japan, who's ahead of us in this aging curve. There, I think the average age in Japan's in the 50s. And so it's where we're going. I understand it. It's social and it's cultural, but it is another one of those data points that says we are somewhat disadvantaged.
With the time that you have left at Focus Brands, when you wake up every day, what's your goal? What's your goal there to make a difference? What's your long-term vision? What can we come to expect? Because it's a whole lot more than walking in a door and everybody knows the slogan of welcome to Moe's.
It truly is. And if you think about our business model, the independent operator who, in the U.S. alone, we probably produce 300 new stores on average. If that's only 20 employees per store, which is usually more than that, you have thousands of jobs that get created. And so I think a lot about how do we make sure that we're doing the best we can to the degree at which we can control the unit economics for our owners, because our owners are the ones who have to win for the company to win. The other thing that's always on my mind more than ever these days is, will I eventually leave behind a super strong management team? Because that's our legacy. Our legacy is that people are focused on the guest and focused on the owner operator, and that their heart is to do the right thing for them.
And I follow I think she's your COO, Kat Cole.
Yep, Kat.
I follow her on LinkedIn, and that has to have been massive for her brand. Her ability to communicate she's somebody I read all the time, right or wrong.
Yeah.
I think she's very interesting, and she's obviously very intelligent. Do you think that this is the last job you're ever going to have? What do you ultimately want to
Well, just a comment on Kat for a second. I mean, she is a thought leader, and she has been an amazing partner for me because if you, again, you're looking at this guy and going, well, I'm a long way from being a millennial, right? Gen Z, I'm not. And so I get a lot of my insights from Kat, who touches so many spheres of influence and the future that I don't, they're just not going to be in my circle in Sandy Springs, but they need to be in my circle because I'm running a global business. And so it's great to have people on your team who you trust and who are really good at breaking patterns themselves and information gatherers. So that's great. Now, what was that other part? When am I announcing my retirement? Is that what you said?
When are you announcing your retirement? What if you had to? I see you with another transition at some point, and you don't strike me as a guy who's going to rust out.
Yeah.
You don't strike me as a guy who's going to burn out.
Yeah, no. I had a
you'll work forever.
Years ago, my first management job, I had a farmer, grower. He was very, very successful, 2 sons farming. And I remember looking at Fred Martin one day and I said, Fred, why don't you retire? And Fred gave me that term. He said, I'm going to wear out before I rust out. You're right. I'm not done. This one is still engaging to me. I enjoy the business and I enjoy my management team, but I've got a long way to go, a lot to do yet in my life. So
I know you have a relationship with Louis Giglio, who had started the whole passion brand movement in the church. I know you're a long time. I don't know that anybody's a long time member at that church, but I know that he. He started out here.
10 years. I've been there half of them.
You drove past his old office when you walked in here. It sits right at Main Street and Highway 9. Yeah. And I know that there's a soft spot in this community because he spent a lot of time working here when there was not a lot out here. What's your involvement there, and how do you serve kind of on his board of directors? What do you offer a guy who seems so accomplished?
Not a lot. I will tell you that first of all, I don't have a role like that, board of directors. That's not what it is. But I do have the benefit of getting to know him over the last couple of years, and I will tell you that he is incredibly intense. He is so smart. He gathers up information. He remembers it, and he, interestingly, is triangulating life and bringing it back into the church, into where passion goes. I had the pleasure of being one of the speakers and addressed the annual planning session for the church. And man, that was intimidating because how do you take the secular world I live in and how do you think about bringing the idea of brand and leadership and bringing it back and affecting a big church organization? And I don't know, if I failed or was able to make those comparisons, but just the privilege and I guess speaks to the idea of what Louis does, which is he's just out there. He's just thinking about how to make sure he stays real for the people that he's trying to reach, and he is real. He's the real deal.
What would you say, just to change gears one more time, as you guys attract a workforce and you attract young talent? I know that you guys have a conscious program around MARTA, and whether or not that has been successful, I don't know, to actually get people to use transit or to use a shuttle service from your office there. Do you think people use it, or do you think that it's just not the culture of the South? Obviously, living in London, you can't be totally adverse to the idea of transit. What do you do? What type of landscape do you try to create for those people that you do have? Off your office, how you get there, how do you recruit them? What do you guys look for?
So a couple of things, but this may not be a popular answer for you either. I don't know where you stand on it.
Which is good. I like people not knowing.
Yeah, no. So I don't know this, but I will tell you that we have an increasing number of riders on the rapid transit. We provide free annual passes and a shuttle multiple times a day to move between the nearest MARTA location and our office, to make that really convenient. So you don't have to pay for parking, you don't have to have a car, and you can get back and forth to home. It would be more popular if we could pull from the north more than we pull in from the south. We certainly, it's not a statement about people or anything else other than a lot of our employees
live in downtown.
They live north of town.
They live north of town.
They live outside the perimeter. They're out here because of schools and quality of life and all the other reasons that people are in a great community like this one in Alpharetta. And so if there were a way for them to be able to use MARTA, I know that we would see more people there. And that's really important to us. I mean, we sit in a very complicated, congested area of Atlanta.
I issue my opinions about everything on Monday night, and other than that, I literally try to ask questions.
Okay.
Because it makes me a more, from a Chamber of Commerce perspective, you're somebody that they would ask what would help you attract a workforce.
Right.
I ask you that question not knowing the answer, but I also ask it selfishly, because if we are luring people out here, what are the tools in my toolkit? So it makes some sense. What would you, if there was anything that you wanted to leave us with today? And I thank you so much. I'd love to get you back as time goes on. If there's anything, you're very generous with your time. You always take my calls when I have stupid questions. And I genuinely appreciate that you're somebody who's willing to, guys that are just a little bit younger that are willing to ask questions, that want more for their careers, want more out of life. You're one of those guys. It may not be tomorrow, but you always get back to me.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. But what do you value the mentorship part of it? Is that where you like to invest your time outside of going to ski and seeing six kids and how many up-teen grandchildren now?
Right. Yeah. 13 of them. It's an amazing number. I just said that and you think, like, what is this guy like?
I have 3 kids.
Like, yeah. Wow. One of the things that it goes all the way back to, I was just a young kid. There was in the farm community was pretty dull and pretty boring. And it was the neighbor lady of all things who was kind of a tomboy, recently married and a nice woman and a wonderful person. Anyway, she was fanatic about basketball. People play basketball, and she took an interest in me and taught me how to play basketball. And basketball became my life through high school. And I've been blessed throughout my whole life to have people who invested in me. And all of those things were things that made me who I was. So I recognize that comes with a price, which means I need to turn it around and give it back. And so these days I spend a lot more time giving back and giving advice if anybody's interested. It's free. And that's what it's worth.
They have to go out of their way to find you, because I'm not going to put your number out there.
Yeah, but I enjoy it. I really enjoy the life lessons that I learned from some amazing leaders. All of which had different strengths that I tried to pull from and apply to my life. And, when I get a chance and somebody honors you with the greatest gift in the world, then they actually listen to you, then make it worthwhile for them. And I try and do that.
Well, Steve DeSutter, thank you very much for spending time with us today. This has been another episode of the Ben Burnett Show. I want to thank Wendell Strickland and Strongside Solutions for jumping on board with us to sponsor. Steve, you're amazing. Thank you.
Ben, my pleasure.
Have a great day, everybody.